Welcome back to the Reliably Intermittent Podcast. Here with Clemens Nelson. Back again for episode 7. I guess 8.5 if you want to look at the halvesies that we've been doing. But back again is me, Aaron Ware. With me again, as usual, is Drew Esposito. How you doing, Drew?
Doing good. Full house today.
Yeah, we have 2 new guests. We figured we'd continue the theme we did with the head honcho last week. Now we have a few more of our wonderful employees here, and I will allow them, since it's their first foray into the podcast, to introduce themselves. So not all at once. Y'all figure out who's going to go first.
All right. Well, I'm Heidi Miller. I'm an account manager with Clemens Nelson.
And I'm Somany Pitch. I'm a senior consultant.
Super excited to have new folks on the pod, get more voices out there. So again, you don't have to listen to my nasally drone and Drew's charming joie de vivre. We want to have more folks on here. And I think today it's a good topic to have multiple viewpoints on, because I think what we're going to be talking about today is how, I think in a kind of a strange way, the pandemic, and yes, we're going to talk about the topic of hashtag 2020, real life, the new normal, whatever you want to call it. COVID for employers is kind of giving them an opportunity in a way to come up with new ways to incentivize how employees work for employers, how beyond, the traditional 401k, vacation, the things that everybody does, right? Not everybody, but the majority of employers out there in kind of the career type fields, incentivize folks to work for them. Because I think if you talk to employers broadly, I know how my philosophy is that employers thrive when employees are thriving. You get better production, you get better effort, you get better employees when you create a culture and an opportunity for employees to do their best, however that needs to be. And I think 2020 has really shown a light on that, on how you need to be able to adapt to these kinds of situations that you can't plan for. We can all plan for this, that, or the other based off of projected workloads and whatnot, but nobody can plan for a pandemic and having to, like we talked about last week with Brian, adjust to technology and stuff on the fly. So, Drew, what are some of the things that you're looking at when we want to talk about this topic?
I've been kind of brainstorming some ideas for my clients, because what they're facing now is a dilemma of the toss-up between employee safety, employee productivity, and morale. So, everyone was doing these work from homes, telework things. Then the lockdowns, depending on where you are, what state you were, ended to some degree. I guess they're getting implemented now across the nation to some other degree. But a lot of people didn't bring their employees back, or they were nervous about bringing them back because of liability from safety concerns. And then people start getting a little bit frustrated because they go, no one wants to come back to work. But the bosses are worried that stuff isn't getting done. So it's this never-ending struggle in the workforce of trying to balance these competing interests, right? An employer's interest and an employee's interest. They're not always competing, but often they are. And I like what you said with the opportunity. I always thought of it as a really corny saying, don't look at things as problems for employers. If a problem arises, you should look at it as an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to think of something creative. And I really thought that was a really cheesy way to come about it, especially in our role, because boy, I just see a lot of problems and they do not come across as opportunities. But maybe I was wrong.
And logically, right, dealing with HR the way that we do, I don't think we're going to sit here and characterize a lot of the phone calls we've been getting here, particularly more recently, where you'll get a police chief calling you and saying, hey, I've got 19 patrol officers and 6 of them just popped positive for COVID. I'm not saying that's an opportunity, because good Lord, but there are certain aspects of this that forcing, kind of like what we did, forcing an employer to look at technology, forcing employers to look at existing operations in a way that you can tweak it to get the job done, but in a way that works within the construct of what we're facing, where you've got governors saying work from home, work from home, work from home. If you can swing it, work from home. Where you've got just the practical reality of not wanting to get 20 people in an office, even like where
Yeah.
we are, where we all have individual offices, right? It still doesn't necessarily make the most sense to have everybody in here all the time.
Whoa there, Aaron. You don't need to humble brag about our individual offices for everybody that doesn't,
Well, and
Yeah,
I did see something too where basically like employers were forced to jump ahead like 10 years because they all of a sudden had to get on board with this work from home and this flexibility. And so there was no more, we'll just kind of do it when we need to do it. Everybody had to do it and they did it all at once.
yeah, innovation out of necessity or
Exactly.
fast tracking their plans. So
Yep.
there's kind of two ideas that I thought of that I wanted kind of Somany and Heidi's input, because there's only so much input that you can get from two mid-30s white men that is not very helpful to 50+% of the population. So one of the ones that I honestly just had thought about this morning was, I've got clients. We've got people that do benefits like educational incentives or educational allowances that will pay X dollars towards your degree or anything like that. And for a lot of my clients, that's a benefit that doesn't cost a lot and it isn't utilized a lot either. So,
Well, and frankly, sometimes it's a benefit that you're training people to leave you.
very
I
good
mean,
point.
it's even a benefit that may not be in your long-term interest as an employer, but it's certainly something that's a benefit to your employees, and you can provide benefits to employees that may not always be a direct net benefit to you.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you
absolutely.
there.
No. So the one I thought about this morning, and get your guys' input on like how it would affect you, or if it's something you would think that it's positive for our clients, would be, what if in light of the school lockdowns, right, and the virtual schooling and the hybrid schooling, I know my kids are certainly not getting any type of comparable education from myself. They get a completely different education when I'm stay at home with them and my wife stay at home with them. Two different ball games.
Yep.
So I said, what if we did, rather than an educational allowance, like a tutoring stipend or something along those, that actually to be used for your beneficiary? And am I crazy, or is that something you guys see as a possible benefit to make people want to come to work, make people want to work while they're at home, retain and attract all these things? Because everybody in this room is a millennial, so we're really kind of advising our clients on how to get people like us to come and work from them, to attract and retain them. Right? These are your long-term employees, your future, your Gen X, your millennials, and coming up your Gen Z. But millennials are the largest segment of the workforce. So what benefits are we going to offer them post-pandemic while we figure out this vaccine over the next 12, 18 months?
I think that's a great idea because, like, for instance, I have my 9-year-old. So my kids are so far spread out. My 16-year-old, he's getting ready to study for ACTs, SAT prep. I can't, so I have the baby. So I can't, take extra time to push him to study. If I could have a tutor come in to do SAT, ACT prep, get him ready for the February SATs, that would be awesome. And then even with my 9-year-old, because, she's working on division and I can't, I have to try to balance the baby and then working from home. That would be like, I wouldn't feel like I'm kind of sinking and trying to, like, I'm not doing her enough justice by showing her exactly like what she needs to do.
Well, it's back to that concept of thriving, right? Not surviving.
Yeah.
How do we thrive?
Yeah, and I think there's still this expectation that we give 100% in every aspect of our lives. So you still give 100% as a parent, you still give 100% to your work life, and the reality is you can't give 100% to all of those things right now. So something's got to give. And I agree with Somany. I think something like that would be, I mean, I would look at it as a benefit, something that I would certainly utilize. Something else that, we're seeing out there is like the virtual care, which whether or not it could be used for kids that are not school age, so that are younger, I don't know. I can see that going bad, but basically it's where you have somebody on a computer sitting with your kids for a couple of hours to help kind of keep them distracted while you get some work done. I mean, I could see that as something that would be great. I think, age and personality of the kid would certainly have an impact on how well that would work.
Well, I think all of those are probably better opportunities on this kind of theme of thriving than what the easiest thing to do is, because whether you've got your iPad, you've got your phone or whatever. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is a pretty easy one for my house
Absolutely. Yeah.
to allow the 4-year-old and the 2-year-old to kind of veg for a minute. But is that really like that's surviving?
Hmm.
Because I know my wife or me, when we're doing what we've got to do in a given time when we're at home, it's easy just to say, okay, 2 episodes, 43 minutes. So that gives us 43 minutes to do this necessity, right? But nobody in that circumstance is actually doing anything productive beyond getting through that hour, right?
Yep.
So those are things that I think what Drew was alluding to a minute ago. I think there's a cost associated with it, right? But there's a tangible benefit, because if you are sitting in a situation, and feel free to confirm or deny this one however you see fit, but if you're in a situation where your kid is in a situation where they're growing,
Hmm.
right, I think from my perspective it makes it a heck of a lot easier to shift my focus to something that's productive for me, or for whatever it is that I'm doing. If I know that they're doing something that I'm like, oh God, I know I shouldn't put them in front of the TV again, but
Yeah.
if they're doing something good, I feel it's easier to actually dedicate my mental capacity to the thing that I'm trying to get done and do that well.
Agreed.
Agree. Yep.
Well, and I mean, this is something like to be, purely sexist about. I definitely don't have the feeling that I have to be 100% at everything I do. I think that's definitely a woman's prerogative. I've heard things like my wife, like for working moms, and this is not a degradation on stay-at-home moms, but I know there's always like this social media battle between stay-at-home mom, working mom, and who works harder, and like all this infighting. Um, I know my wife as a working mother always feels like I got to do 100% of the cleaning. She only has to do 95% of the cleaning. Let's be clear. 100% of the cooking, 100% of the childcare. So it's exactly what you're saying. And if you're feeling you're failing at all of them, right? Like
Mhm.
it's like I could be mediocre or less than mediocre at my job, at parenting, at having a welcoming home, having a fulfilling hobby, or if and then tutoring in the virtual daycare, it's not the end all solution, but I'm like, if
Correct.
it frees you up to
Yeah.
focus on something to truly be good at it, right? If you need to be good at your job to pay your rent, like it seems like a crappy situation for employees to be in, to go, I have to choose to be a not 100% parent or potentially get fired from my job because I'm not doing a good enough job. So like thinking of ways like that. Now I may be off base, but this may be,
No,
I don't know.
I agree, because then you can kind of focus your attention. I don't have to worry about that my 9-year-old who, she's not independent enough to understand how to do division, or like like even recently, because she got gifted testing and she tested gifted. So now I'm feeling like I'm failing her because I don't have enough time to work on these gifted activities with her, because we're just trying to stay afloat. I'm trying to make sure I get all my work done. I'm trying to make sure that, like each of us are trying getting our daily work. They have their assignments. We're just trying to get that like done. We're not even trying to do anything extra.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree. I think that would be a great benefit.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think on the opposite side of that is, I've got one of mine who we're trying to go through the evaluation process with the school and everything. So you feel like you're failing because you're not giving enough time to your child that really needs that time. So I totally agree. I think
yeah, and
it's hard.
I think that's a good point. Like it can be both. It's like it's every spectrum. So whether
Mhm.
you're sitting there and you're behind in reading and you need like a focus, a tutored focus to help,
Yep.
like with an EAP thing or math or whatever, or your kid is on the cusp of getting into the gifted or gifted, like how to keep them there, right? It's like it can be used for any type of student.
Yep.
That's kind of how I envisioned it. And I was like, I know, so like when I work from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because that's when my wife is at work, I basically take emergency calls, answer emergency emails. But then once my wife gets home, then I really start working, right? Like from sick, because I thought I'd be able to dual work. It just doesn't happen with the 3.5-year-old. And then it also doesn't happen with my 7-year-old, kind of like you were just saying, Somany, is I can set her and have her do the easy stuff. Like I don't know what these programs are, Dreambox and this and that, but like the math for her, she doesn't read fluently enough to read the instructions of a math. Like, so I got to make sure she understands it. And I'm going to have to sit by their side on that day. If I had a tutor to work for like 1 hour for the math fundamentals or whatever, I could theoretically, for my job and for my clients, focus all of my energy and not be working after hours. Now, we're privileged that our work lets us do a lot of stuff on different hours, but when I thought about this morning, I was like, there could be a benefit. Aaron.
Well, just along those lines, right? Because there's so many valid competing interests, right? You know, we want to dedicate 100% of our focus when in reality, we're getting pulled in like 300% of directions. You know, the math doesn't make sense. Don't get hung up on it. But when we're getting pulled to do like 1,000 things and we want to give our all to all of those things, it's impossible. So I think that's where, yeah, the construct of our business, we're lucky in that we can kind of do some things like that and we can dedicate time in different ways. But I think employers have to face this oncoming freight train that is this situation, because it isn't going anywhere. And the ones that aren't willing to adapt, you're going to lose quality employees. You're necessarily, if you get stuck in the old ways, you're necessarily limiting your employee pool. You're limiting the quality that you have existing. You're limiting your ability to recruit quality people. If you're so set in, we've got to have this person that does it this way, your pool is tiny, right?
Yeah.
So in opening your pathways to allow employees to succeed, you're necessarily opening the door to better people, and that malleability, that flexibility in how you get the job done, I think really allows you to be a more successful employer. You just got to be willing to kind of open your eyes to the different ways that these things can get done. And
Agreed.
to do that, you got to know
You
what
have
the job
happier
is.
employees too.
Again,
You have happier employees.
yeah. Again,
Yeah, and I like, don't get me wrong, I think ideally for me, the tutoring thing, the employers that should consider this are employees who are already starting with like an education incentive, because I get people are losing money too, right? So like employers aren't just going to start spending money on extra benefits.
Correct.
That's the cost benefit. So
Yeah.
if you already are offering a benefit that's not being utilized, you know, or revisit your gym benefit, right? If you're an employer that's providing money to the YMCA for a YMCA membership, but gyms have been closed, can you reallocate an existing expenditure and utilize it somewhere that will get used with this shift? And I also feel like even when the pandemic does go away, when the vaccine is out there, whatever happens, right? It is a different working environment now permanently, because employers have seen that telecommuting is very, very capable on what technology can do when it's fully unleashed. So I want to throw that out there. I think employers are going to have to say, well, now's not the time to pick to choose to spend $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 on benefits if they're battling a furlough or a layoff.
Well,
and
oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Aaron. I
Go
was going to
ahead.
say, and if money is an issue, what about offering kind of like a flex spending for childcare? So, that's still coming out of the employee's pocket, but it's kind of, they can automatically put it into this account where they can pull from it for these creative ideas, for virtual care, for tutoring, for just regular childcare. I mean, that's certainly an option if money is an issue right now.
You know, it'd be great for for the dependent care,
Yeah.
flexible spending care.
Yeah.
You're able to get the dependent care who's also a tutor, right? Like, so that way you can submit it properly through their tax ID and
Yep.
like, hey, I'm looking for a tutor, but I'm going to submit it as dependent care for taxable
Mhm.
reimbursement.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Well, and the difficult part here, because I know, we work with so many public employers that work from home flexibility. I don't want to turn off like half of our client base from listening to this one, because I recognize there's some jobs out there, right, that this is impossible.
Mhm.
Law
Yeah.
enforcement, firefighters, you got to be there, right? But you've seen a lot of them, to their credit, I've seen a lot of our clients get creative in a pandemic situation, that maybe there's some techniques that they may be able to use moving forward with how they structure a work week, that it's kind of forced them to get adaptable, like the 5 day 8 hour work week. We, based off of inertia, we've seen that in so many different fields, but you've seen some of our law enforcement clients go to 12-hour days, but then you have more days off, right? And some inertia based operations that were hesitant to do it, whether that's employee driven, whether that's employer driven, um, you've seen them kind of tweak that schedule to go, okay, you're going to be here a little bit more, but then you're going to be here less days, so that then you can work with however you need to work, if that's feasible for people to get that kind of thing done. I mean, the unfortunate reality is there's just some jobs that you have to be there, and it forces you to get creative within the constructs you have there. I mean, we're not going to offer you a panacea on the different, work from home cops don't exist.
Well, and I think this kind of goes into like another idea I had, and playing right into like kind of the tutoring aspect, virtual daycare and stuff like that, is the places where you can't do that, or the jobs where it's just physically not possible. There's no chance. If, as a result of COVID and as a result of the pandemic, employers are realizing that their physical space is overbuilt, that I don't need 30 offices, but I've got 30 offices. I built it, or I've got a lease for the next 5 years. I don't know. But the foreseeable future, maybe the next 2-3 years, I'm only going to be utilizing 60% of the space. Now, this one is much more complicated,
Mhm.
but I thought, like, if you have school age kids like Somany and Heidi, myself and Aaron, even though Somany, Aaron, and I all, well, and Heidi, sorry, all four of us now all have younger children as well. Like a virtual learning space in your office. Like, so if you have a dedicated, unused conference room, unused office space that's got the computer, it's hooked up to reliable internet if you're in a rural area, it's got pens, papers, and they're close by, so it's not difficult. You can come in, set your kid up for their virtual learning in this office, and you're right next door. And in our office, that works. And we've all in this room have brought our kids in before, not pandemic related, like where I don't know what's happened in anyone's life, but I've seen everybody's kids come in and they just sit in their own office and they're well behaved and they're relatively well behaved, quiet. And that's our 7-year-olds, our 9-year-olds, our 11-year-olds. That could be an option for employers. I especially see it on the tech side. The idea that you could have a computer that's on a company's broadband with great internet access, and they have a nice big desk where they can take notes and they're not cramped. Like, we've turned our living room into a schoolhouse. They're on these tiny desks. For every different assignment, we're putting a keyboard in, it's taking stuff off. Like, they can't actually work. There's not a good workspace. So I think providing the ability for kids to learn and succeed is just like an employer, right? Providing the right tech and the right tools in order to succeed for your job is the same thing. So if you can provide an area that encourages your employee to come back to work, right? Hey, you can come back to work. I've provided this spot for you. I know you're dealing with virtual schooling. You got to look at liability and all sorts of other stuff, but get creative, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I obviously with 3 kids think it's a great idea, but I certainly see the complications. And mostly because I ran into it myself when I wanted to bring my daughter in because she had testing one day. And I'm thinking to myself, well, we all know that kids are the COVID spreaders that, don't have symptoms. And I could see people being concerned having kids, in the workplace, moving about, especially the kids that are on that hybrid model where they're still going to school, then they're not in school a couple of days a week, so they're still kind of exposed. So I could see complications with that. But I mean, if you're trying to be flexible and you're wanting to work with your employees, setting up a designated workspace for kids kind of where they're staying throughout the day, um, I would certainly consider something like that. I think it would be great.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think in a smaller office, it's probably a lot more capable
Correct.
because the
Agree.
communication is a lot easier.
Yep.
Right? Like, so like if
logistics.
if I was going to want to bring in, Paige, and I could easily go, hey, I can shoot an email out to 6 people
Mm-hmm.
who I know are going to be in the office and be like, hey, on Tuesday, I just want to let you guys know I'm bringing in Paige. If that bothers you, certainly let me know, because then I won't.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, they may also choose to work from home. And when I'll come, I'll have them mask up and then put them in the office, right?
Absolutely.
Like I'll limit the exposure. If you've got 200, 300 employees, and between those, there's 75 kids,
Yeah.
there may be a scheduling issue.
Yeah. Yep. And that's where I saw the complication is for us, it's perfect, but for a big employer, I just see a bunch of kids running around, I guess.
Touching desks.
Well, with the COVID numbers doing what they're doing, I think it's in everyone's best interest to be proactive here, because I don't, we're heading into Thanksgiving, we're heading into Christmas, so there's already some time built in there where I think we were all knowing that school wasn't going to be open, but the way it seems to be trending, we may have to deal with this practical reality at the first of the year that none of the schools are open, whether it's, in terms of physically, the hybrid options may be going. We may be going back to what it was toward the end of the last school year, where everything was this distance learning thing, right? And it's the more availability and opportunity that employees have to be able to do things like that probably means you're getting more productivity, all based off all the things we've already talked about, right? I think it's incumbent on, and it's, I think, been proven that proactive employers are the ones that are thriving under the circumstances as much as anybody can thrive in hashtag 2020. You're thriving by being proactive. You're planning for what is a likely inevitability here. I think that's, if anything, if anybody listening takes anything out of this today, it is to be proactive in thinking about these strategies. Because if you wait, you're going to get caught flat-footed like we were early in the pandemic in how to address this and how to maintain productivity. I don't know how many times we can be reactive as employers in society and expect to come out relatively unscathed on the back end. And that's for businesses and that's for employees, right? The more proactive you can be, I think the better off we all will be.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Well,
I don't know if I've got any other. Those are the two big ideas, and you hit on some others. One that, like in passing, like compressed work schedules, flexible work schedules. I think the only other thing, if you're kind of for client base, advising clients on some big issues, is evaluating ADA accommodation requests. It's not necessarily COVID related, but I think they need to be scrutinized a little bit more, because at least me personally, the undue hardship was used often when it came to telecommute. But we don't have the tech, we don't have the ability, we can't track your work, all these things.
mm-hmm.
Well, when stuff got shut down, everybody magically was able to do it. So are you going to be able to continue to make that defense, right? That it's somehow an undue hardship when I switched everybody for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. Like, how much of a hardship is it?
Yeah.
So I think people need to kind of maybe not be as broad brush with the denial of an accommodation. And if you're going to, I think it's more than document. You probably want to flesh it out, right? Like specifically, this is why it's not practical.
Or practical, or using the last 7 months, 6 months, whatever, to actually go back and say, here's how we know it did or didn't work.
Yeah, this was the reduction of the amount of stuff we got done, right? Like, yes, we did it, but we didn't do it well. We did it because we had to, but it didn't work well, right? And
Yeah.
I do think that's an undue hardship. If you're going to tell a business that I did it, but I was 50% less productive, and therefore I had to get the PPP loan, and I may be going out of business, and I had to lay off 50% of my workforce, that is the definition of an undue hardship, right? Like, so...
Or for our public agencies, we served X, in 2019, we served this many clients. In 2020, we served X minus whatever. I mean, you've got to be able to justify it. You're 100% right in terms of what the real world, in terms of that issue is going to look like in the future. You're going to have to, you're not just going to be able to say with any kind of sympathetic ear that we just can't do that. Without now we've got real world data to show either way.
Absolutely. I'll do the one final thing, completely unrelated. No one in the room knows it's coming because I'm really bothered by this. If you need to comment on this, you are a communist if you drink your soda out of a straw or drink coffee out of a straw. I have never seen such a thing, and then Aaron decided to do it on camera, and I'm losing my mind over here. I am losing my mind.
I would have made it better if I had a cup of coffee with a straw, and I should have if I knew this was coming.
Coffee.
I love the new ideas. I love it. I'm going to do it now.
Yeah, I really enjoy. We just spent 40 minutes talking about being adaptable and malleable in society. And then Drew just puts the cherry on top saying, oh no, I don't believe any of that. You can't do this thing because I don't like it. Never seen it.
Look, there's things that are as consistent as apple pie on the 4th of July, Aaron. You don't drink coffee out of a straw. It doesn't make sense.
You know what? You're going to see so many people now start drinking coffee with a straw.
Yeah, you're going to start eating your Snickers bar with a knife and fork.
Correct.
Like Costanza and Seinfeld. This is
if it saves my teeth enamel, yes.
There you go.
I'm going to start doing it.
Reason for everything.
I'm more than willing to drop another 10 minutes of just piling
no,
on.
There's no room.
Sorry.
That's it.
I'm happy to do it. I just want
that's it for me. I can't. I'll do a spin-off podcast on how to properly drink beverages.
Yeah, that'll be a half mini-sode. Drew's philosophy.
Sorry to derail it. That's all I got for you.
Well, and I'm just gonna say next time I'll have my coffee with straw.
Fair enough.
Oh, I mean, I'm gonna go out now and just purchase just the fanciest straw.
Yeah.
Just curly,
so it's visible.
A kid's straw.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I'm just gonna really get entrenched on this one.
Go to Bob Evans and get one of the curly Q that they let the kid pick out. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, Heidi, Somany, thank you for joining us today. To the listeners out there, this won't be the last time you see them because I'm just going to keep bugging them until they keep doing them. Drew, thank you.
All right. Good to see everybody again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Like, subscribe, follow.
100%. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Apparently, I've come to learn that I should not be encouraging the viewers on YouTube to subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe because YouTube apparently doesn't like that. I've heard no such thing on the podcast providers, so feel free to subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe on Apple.
But not YouTube.
Don't do it on YouTube. But please do watch to the end. But subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody. And thank you for joining us on episode 7-ish of the Reliably Intermittent podcast. And until next time, goodbye.
We want to thank you again for joining us on the Reliably Intermittent podcast. Now it's time for a bit of a disclaimer. This podcast and all others on this feed are for informational purposes only and not legal advice. No attorney-client relationship is formed by listening to this podcast or any others on the feed. Should you require or want legal advice, we encourage you to reach out to an attorney or statutory legal counsel, as the case may be. Thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.